Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching COVID-19 India Fights Back. I'm Frank Rausen Pereira. French drug maker Sanofi and its British peer GlaxoSmithKlin have started a clinical trial for a protein-based COVID-19 vaccine candidate as pharmaceutical companies race to develop treatments against the coronavirus pandemic. Sanofi and GSK said in a joint statement that they had started the phase 1 and 2 trial for their adjuvanted COVID-19 vaccine, which they hope to make available across the world. This vaccine candidate uses the same recombinant protein-based technology as one of Sanofi's seasonal influenza vaccine with GSK's established pandemic adjuvant technology. Sanofi expects to start their trial, or rather the final phase of testing, in early December with approval targeted in the first half of 2021. Novavax, a late-stage biotechnology company developing next-generation vaccines for serious infectious diseases, announced updates on its phase 3 clinical development program of NVX-CoV2373, its COVID-19 vaccine candidate. The company outlined specific diversity targets for its large-scale COVID-19 vaccine study expected to begin in the United States and Mexico next month. Novavax, which is already testing its vaccine in phase 3 trial in Britain, aims to include at least 15 African Americans, or rather 15% African Americans, 10% to 20% Latinos, and 1 to 2% Native Americans, the company said at a meeting of advisors to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In this edition of our special on COVID-19, we will analyze the likely impact of protein-based COVID-19 vaccines. Joining me on the program today are Dr. Amulya K. Panda, Director, National Institute of Immunology; Professor N.K. Ganguly, former Director General, Indian Council of Medical Research; and Professor Raghavan Vardarajan, Department of Molecular Biophysics, IISc. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this special broadcast. All right, Professor Ganguly, let me begin the program with you first. Let's first try and understand, what are protein vaccines?
Actually, almost every vaccine, the immune response comes against the protein or carbohydrate linked to protein. However, the protein is presented in different way. You can present it through virus vectors, you can present it through messenger RNAs, and ultimately when they get into the body, they produce a protein consistently, and immune response comes against that protein. So here, the main issue over here is this, that there are pure protein vaccines also, and these proteins need an adjuvant. So the first example you were talking about, Sanofi and GSK, both are established vaccine makers. Sanofi recently purchased the Protein Sciences, a company, in 2017. This particular protein, or this particular company, used to express through baculovirus in SF9 cell lines the pre-fusion protein of the spike protein. GSK has one tremendous property. It has got very strong adjuvant, which are known as ASO series. This ASO series adjuvants are real property of GSK, and in every of their vaccine, they use this adjuvant, and very small amount of protein is needed with this. So they have combined, both vaccine company, they have combined with their own resources and own specialization. So they have done 422 such. Whereas the Novavax is a startup company in Rockville, United States, and it also has a similar platform. It makes VLP vaccine, again using baculovirus and SF9 cells. VLP vaccine, it is a virus-like protein vaccines. They form nanoparticles where the protein is expressed. So Novavax has a tie-up, and they have a CLP Biologicals in India with Cadila Pharmaceuticals. And already their influenza vaccine is in the market in India. both H1N1 and seasonal influenza. And they have another subunit, rabies vaccine with rabies G protein combined in the VLP format. How the Novavax in this case is using a adjuvant, which again they have purchased a company which makes this adjuvant. This is a matrix adjuvant, matrix saponin based adjuvant, and they are already well advanced in their trial. They started from Australia. They have done in UK. In UK, they are entering phase 3. Entry in the US is recent. So in this particular format, they are trying to get all ethnic populations, as you have said, and they will be much more earlier. Their vaccine will come much more earlier. They have they are not making it in their company in Ahmedabad. They have actually contacted Serum Institute of India, and foundation have given them money. They will be manufacturing it in Czechoslovakia. They have a plant in Czechoslovakia, so this will be manufactured in Czechoslovakia. So the Serum Institute will be manufacturing 2 vaccines. One is the Oxford vaccine, and the second one is the Novavax vaccine. So both these vaccines will be there. So Amulya and Vardarajan, they have their own vaccine, and if you ask them a right question, they will describe their vaccine to you.
Okay, but before we talk about those particular vaccines, Dr. Panda, let's first try and understand and analyze the term adjuvants now, because not everyone is from the medical background, not everybody is from the pharma background. So to simplify things a little bit, what are adjuvants and how do they help in vaccine creation?
So adjuvants are substances.
No, I'm asking Dr. Panda. Professor, I'll come back to you. Professor Ganguly, I'll come back to you. Dr. Panda.
Okay.
As sir told, adjuvants are things which activate the immune system and help getting a right kind of immune response for a vaccine. See, as told, a vaccine is nothing but a protein or a carbohydrate. If you inject a protein, soluble protein, like you take insulin, it will not give you any immune response. So to get desired immune response, you need the antigen or the candidate vaccine to be present and processed through antigen presenting cell. These adjuvants helps in helping them and getting the desired response. So adjuvant is one essential component of the vaccine, and currently the most useful adjuvant which is used is alum, is used for last 80 years. It is aluminum hydroxide and aluminum phosphate. That is one. Of course, there are other adjuvants being developed by GSK, S2 series and many things. But the most extensively used adjuvant in all vaccine, whether it is TT, DT, hepatitis B, it is the alum particles, which the antigen is adsorbed and injected. So in essence, adjuvant helps in improving the immunogenicity of the antigen and giving a desired immune response in the body.
So what are the different types of vaccines that are being developed around the world, and what is the kind of vaccine that that seems like the most effective one, at least in the trial phases?
So are you talking about all vaccines or only protein-based vaccines?
No, all vaccines as a whole, general vaccines, because let's broaden the scope a little bit and understand what are the different types of vaccines we have out there.
Right. So there are a few different classes. One are so-called viral vectors. And these viral vectors, most of the ones which are currently at the forefront of clinical testing are adenovirus vectors. And so what this means is that these inside the adenoviruses, the researchers have inserted the gene which encodes the surface protein of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And these adenoviruses, they can be injected into the body, and they go into cells. Now, these are non-replicating viral vectors, so they don't reproduce once they go inside the cell, but they are able to go into the cell, and then the production of the of this protein can can happen. And that protein then is what the immune system recognizes, and the body produces antibodies against the protein. So that is the adeno or the viral vector vaccines. The other ones which are in advanced stage of clinical testing is the so-called mRNA vaccines. So here what is done is that the genetic material is DNA, and DNA is converted inside the cell into RNA, and the RNA is again read and converted into protein. So in this case, the mRNA is produced outside synthetically in a form which allows it to go inside the cell, because the mRNA is a charged molecule and it doesn't spontaneously easily go into the cell. So the mRNA goes into the cell, and then again the mRNA is read by the cellular machinery, and it produces protein which gets secreted outside the cell, and that protein is recognized by the immune system. So the potential advantages of these modalities is they don't require an adjuvant. The disadvantage is that they have not ever been tested on such a very large scale, and we don't have licensed vaccines which use these modalities. So the third, and of course there are other, there are live attenuated viruses and various other things. But I think for the purposes of this discussion, the three most advanced categories are the viral vectors, in this case the adenoviral vectors, the mRNA, and the protein vaccines. Now, one of the additional issues with the viral vectors is because it's a virus, then after administration, you get antibodies against the viral surface proteins also. So repeated administrations with these viral vectors may be difficult. So the protein vaccines, Dr. Ganguly has already talked about, and these are a very well-established methodology. And so far, in the terms of the clinical trials, in terms of what is called the neutralizing antibody response, which is antibodies which will bind to the virus and prevent it from entering cells, the Novavax vaccine has done the best. But that is only one aspect of immunity that is very easy to measure. And there are other aspects, including cells and immune memory, that are not so easy to measure in the context of clinical trials. And so, therefore, the real result will come from the phase 3 trials. But at the moment, in terms of the neutralizing antibody response, the protein-based vaccines have so far generated better response.
Right. So, Professor Ganguly, since we are here, I'm going to take this particular point that Professor Varadarajan is making forward. And it's also because, I've read so much about it that it seems like the protein-based vaccines are going to be more successful than some of the other types of vaccines. Is that the case? Do you believe that that is how it's going to be?
Actually, many of these vaccines have been successful. Viral vector vaccines have also been successful, and protein-based vaccines traditionally have been used and have been successful. But as Dr. Varadarajan said, what happens that there are large amount of adenovirus antibodies. So normally they use adenoviruses which are not very common. So like adeno 26, adeno 5, shimp adeno, etc. But in the Africa, for the Ebola virus vaccine, they have used this adenovector platform, and there are large amount of antibodies there. So if you have antibodies against the vector, the responses come little tardy. Sometimes adenoviruses which have been used for gene therapy, sometimes they have caused a problem also. So one doesn't know, but adenovirus platform is well established and is good. In the protein-based antigens are very, very defined. And these defined antigens, actually, when added to adjuvants, as Dr. Varadarajan said, they give rise to neutralizing antibody. But here, in the GSK Sanofi system, the antibody response, neutralizing antibody responses have been about same as after natural infection, which is little worrying in the sense that you need more. If because after natural infection, antibodies drop very quickly. So the amount of neutralizing antibody is a concern. It should be much more. The second thing, that many of the viral vectored vaccines have also been tested for T-cell immune responses, which are much more lasting immune responses. This particular platform, the one which has been used by Novavax, that has been tested for T-cell immune responses, but the GSK Sanofi conglomeration's vaccine is little younger. They have not yet tested T-cell immune responses. It will be important that there is T-cell immune responses come up. There is one advantage in the Novavax as well as this other platform and messenger RNA platform. Like the mutations are happening at the moment. Mutation is not a very big issue at this particular moment. But if the mutation happens very fast, which is not happening, but it might happen. They are separating out now, and there are 8 clades actually. So then we will need to change these. So the platform which they are using in the baculovirus, that is why Sanofi did it. Sanofi previously used to make influenza vaccine in an egg-based influenza vaccine. So when you add new strains, it used to take a lot of time. Sure. In this particular platform, you can really deal with the mutations. You could very quickly add on the new mutants into the vaccine system. And if the regulators are right, it happens very quickly. So This is one of the other advantage of using these 2 particular platforms which Sanofi, GSK and Novavax are using. Messenger RNA could also be done in the same way. Messenger RNA very quickly synthesized in very large amounts, and there you could really synthesize the new ones very quickly. But in the adeno-based viral systems, which are based on strong fermentation systems, there you need little more time if you want to add new mutants or new antigen for that particular purpose.
So, Dr. Panda, just for the benefit of the viewers to get in another perspective, so what are the most common, or rather what is the most common protein-based vaccine out there? And as far as protein vaccines are concerned, what has our experience been traditionally?
Okay, let me tell you what Professor Ganguly told. The greatest advantage of a protein-based vaccine is they are cheap to make and they are safe. They are the safest. See, with all viral vector or whole cell vaccine, you get cellular immunopathology and you get antibody-dependent enhancement. You don't get that. So they are the safest vaccine. And number 2, it can be easily produced in a large scale for a population of 1 billion or even large population. It can be produced in the cheapest way. For example, take care of hepatitis B vaccine. It is produced, it's a peptide-based, protein-based vaccine produced in East. It is 10 rupees per dose. No problem. So we have enough experience. It is safe, it is cheap, and the moment you have this alum and other adjuvant, it can be stored in 2 to 4 degrees centigrade like normal vaccine. Whereas the viral vector vaccine, you may have to go to -20, -70, cold chain. So these 3 things are the greatest advantage: cheap, safety, and storage stability. But the most important things are told in the beginning, the adjuvant, because what Sanofi and GSK is doing, GSK is putting its proprietary adjuvant. That is very costly. See, the best adjuvant which people use is alum, which is very cheap. The moment you put GSK adjuvant, that's the thing, because they have invested billions of dollars in Montana to set up an adjuvant research center, and their adjuvant will be costly. You cannot have a costly adjuvant so that the vaccine cost is more than 200, 300 rupees. Something like hepatitis B, it is recombinant protein produced in East, like what Dr. Bharatarajan has expressed. It is absorbed in alum. If that works and that can give you neutralizing titer, that will be wonderful, because it will be cheap, it will be inexpensive, it will be safe, and it will have long-standing things.
Absolutely. Can different types of vaccines have different levels of impact on different ethnic groups? So is that something that needs to be considered too?
It is in principle possible, and it's probably more true of the T-cell responses. I mean, I don't know that, one can definitively answer this question. But by and large, antibody responses, I think, are more a function of age rather than ethnicity, to the best of my knowledge. Maybe Dr. Ganguly can comment further on this. But I think, essentially you need an effective vaccine, and I think an effective vaccine will largely work should work if it's an antibody-based one in all ethnicities. As I said, age is more of an issue. Age and other maybe nutritional status, comorbidities, these are issues, probably more than the ethnicity.
Absolutely. All right. And let me just get a final question in from you as well, on the levels and the stages at which our, Indian vaccines are at, and where do you believe that the best preventive vaccine is going to come from?
Actually, unfortunately for the Indian vaccines, for the manufacturers, there's very little data in the public domain. So there is some data from Bharat Biotech, for example. Those are animal data. The human data is not in the public domain. So none of the Indian manufacturers have, as yet, with their own modalities, have the data available in the public domain. So it's very difficult for me to comment and answer that question.
All right. So, Professor Ganguly, let me get a quick closing comment in from you. I've got limited time, so very briefly, what is the best way forward?
Actually, best way forward will be to plan the distribution, the cold chain and the supply chain, because these vaccines will be available by the middle of 2021. You will have various vaccines. Many Indian manufacturers are all manufacturing under license some of the front runners, and few are making the novel ones. So, however, the distribution, as Dr. Panda said, that messenger RNA vaccines need -70, -80. The adenovirus vector also need appropriate cold chain. To really, there will be demand of who gets first. There is an Indian committee which is deciding on that, but there will be these vaccines in the private sector. So some private sector guys will get it, and another person who will think that I should get it may not get it. So major problem is the deployment, distribution, supply chain, and the cold chain management and the pricing of the vaccine. So these will be the issues which will come up. And one point which what Dr. Varadarajan made, why the ethnic groups are needed, is this, that various ethnic groups respond differently to the virus. Like blacks are very, very susceptible to the virus. Indians actually respond differently. Males and females respond differently. And as he said, age groups respond differently. So that is why we bring in as much diversity as possible when testing a vaccine.
Right. Okay. On that note, then, I'll call it a wrap on this edition of COVID-19 India Fights Back. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. As we leave, we'd like to make an appeal to all our viewers to stay safe from the coronavirus pandemic. Remember to wash your hands and your face regularly. Wear a mask whenever you step outside, because that is the best way of fighting the virus as of now, because there is still no cure or a vaccine. And also remember, follow physical distancing of at least 6 feet. Remember that these small steps can go a long way in tackling the virus.